So, good day, friends. This is Dr. Bob Hamilton, and you have tuned in today to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. It means a lot that you're here. I know that you're busy moms and dads, grandmothers and grandfathers, taking kids to baseball practice and all the things that you have to do. So, the fact that you have tuned in today means a lot to me, and I thank you for that. If you like what you hear, I ask that you pass it on to your family and friends. We're trying to build an audience. And as I say every week, not for Dr. Bob, but for the wonderful people that I bring on this show. And I bring great people every week to you guys. So pass it on. It means a lot to me. That means a lot to me too. So today it is a great pleasure to welcome to the Hamilton Review a friend of mine. He is a fellow pediatrician in Santa Monica. His name is Dr. Dan Ganjian. Dr. Ganjian, welcome to the Hamilton Review.
Thank you, Bob. It's good to be here.
So it's such a pleasure to have you and to share about a very important issue, namely Passover. We're going to talk about Passover, which is coming up in a few days, and we're going to talk about it in a second. But let me just introduce Dan. So Dan is a general pediatrician. He works with St. John's Providence here in Santa Monica. I see Dan pretty much almost on a daily basis. He's the father of 4 children. In addition to being a pediatrician, he is an ordained rabbi. So we got the right guy to talk about Passover today. But Dan, I'm gonna turn the microphone over to you and have you share just a little bit about your life, where where you're from, and the maybe a couple of the passions that you have that have persuaded you in your life to become, number one, a doctor, number two, a pediatrician, and maybe even why you're an ordained rabbi, because I'm fascinated by this. So Dr. Dan Ganjian, you're on.
All right, Bob. Thank you for having me. A little bit about myself. I actually was born in Iran, but I came to New York when I was 2 years old, and I grew up in Long Island. So you'll hear a lot of New York and Long Island accent from me, and that's why you hear my slurring like that. I moved out here for college, med school, residency. I've been out in Southern California, Los Angeles ever since. A little bit of myself. I love to always constantly learn. I'm always reading and learning. I'm fascinated by it. Plus, I love nature as well. I think it's a beautiful thing to see how God created the universe. So I'm an avid biker. I surf. I play trumpet. I have a lot as well. And people hire me out to do trumpet gigs. And usually if like people can't afford it, then I go because that nobody else goes and I do it and I just do it for free. But I love it. I play trumpet all the time, almost on a daily basis. Actually, I'm such an avid trumpet player. I have a portable trumpet in my car with me at all times, wherever I go, because if I have any free time, I take it out and I blast the horn. Why did I become
Can
a
you,
doctor in general?
Dan,
Yeah.
okay, can you play the trumpet? Can you play the shofar?
Oh yes, so I could play the shofar. Although I wasn't able to, for many years I couldn't do it, even though I played the trumpet. It's a different types of muscles, and for years my father, it goes in my family. My father and great grandfather, they were the avid shofar, and my brother as well. I just couldn't do it, even though I was the one who plays professionally trumpet. But in the last 5 years, 6 years, I've gotten it down, and I can give you a nice strong blast now as well.
Wow, that's amazing. So can you play the trumpet voluntary by who is it by? Is that by Haydn?
No, I played more. I was classically trained, but now I just play. It's called Hasidic music, and that's what I have hundreds and hundreds of things. That's what I usually play at this point.
That's very cool. Okay, I have never heard you play the trumpet, and so
Oh, I
would
gotta
you
bring it.
please
I
would you
have
please
it
bring
with
it?
me at all time.
Okay, you should bring it to the pediatric floor, and we're gonna have a little. And I'll bring my violin. Okay,
Oh,
and we'll do
nice
a little. We'll do some music.
duet.
A duet. I'm not sure. I think you might overpower me, but I'll do my best. Okay, so so keep talking.
Yeah. So
You're
then you
telling me
asked
things.
me. I'll
Yeah.
tell you, so you tell why I become a doctor, and
Yes.
the main thing was the proverbial. I love to be a constant learner. I love to help other people all the time, and I feel like I can connect with others really well. So that was one of the reasons that I decided I wanted to go into the medical field. For many years, I actually wanted to become a cardiothoracic surgeon. That was ever since I was 6 years old. That was the thing I wanted to go become cardiac thoracic surgeon, do heart surgery. I'm very good with my hands as well. So that's what I wanted to do. When I went into medical school and I started following around the cardiac thoracic surgeon, I said, "So, tell me about your lifestyle." They looked at me and they said, "There is no lifestyle. There's only work style. You have to make sure that this is your priority and this is what you're going to do all the time." And I understand that, and you have to forget that. But I decided, you know what? I can be one of the best doctors in the world, but at the same time, for my child, I want to be the best father. For my wife, I want to be the best husband. And I decided I need to go into a field that allows for that. So then I started searching, and I loved a lot of different fields that met my criteria. So the main thing that clinched it for me into my PI, I said, in which field do you encounter the happiest patients? In which field is it? Because what you're around goes and rubs off on you.
Mm.
And I said, by far, it's pediatrics. And you were asking about different accolades and I have to say the biggest compliment you can give someone is to call them a pediatrician. And that's how I feel. So then I became a doctor as a pediatrician. And I want to tell you something, Bob, you have probably the same exact thing. I don't feel like I work a day in my life. I feel like the whole day I'm just having fun. I'm
Yeah.
just connecting.
Yeah.
That's what pediatrics is all about. And then when a kid is sick, like you feel for them. Your heart, it hurts you. Like their bodies are, and that baby is something's going on with the reflux. It's bothering you as well, and you can feel that. You feel that, and to make them happy, and you get that smile, and the baby's growing well, and back on the growth chart. These are things that are pleasures that I love. So I love what I do day in and day out. And then as another reason of why you also asked me about why I became a rabbi. So that's actually because it goes to my mentor. The biggest mentor in my life is the Lubavitcher Rebbe, which you read his book, and you also he's the Rebbe. He said that each person should be the rabbi
By
of
the
his own
way,
home.
you have to introduce who Reby is. Reby was a Chabad rabbi back. He actually founded the Chabad movement, I believe, back in
Yep.
New York City, right? And he was eminently amazing guy. And yes, I did read his book. There's a book out there, friends, if you want to pick it up. It's called Reby, R-E-B-B-I. It's written by a guy named Joseph Telushkin. It's a thick book, but it is, if you like to read this kind of stuff, it's definitely worth reading. And Reby, I kind of get Reby. I put that book down and said, I wish I could have met this guy. And he had a gigantic heart, and he really founded the Chabad movement in America.
Exactly. So he's the seventh Chabad rabbi in the dynasties, but him and the previous Rebbe are the ones that brought it to America and blasted it throughout the world, where there are over 6,000 Chabad rabbis now all throughout the world. So he was all about teaching the world about mindfulness, about teaching the world about godness, about universalism, how we're all one and we're not divided. And one of the things that he also said is that each person should be the rabbi of his own home. And I think that was really influential, that I never got to do that. And I said, okay, so after I finished residency, and I said, I'm going to take a break and just enjoy life a little bit and become a pediatrician. And my wife says, nope, I want you to become a rabbi because I know that's important to you. And she would send me to night classes. And I did that for years until I became an ordained rabbi as well.
Amazing. So that was your wife who sent you out the door?
My wife, yes, I owe it to her. Everything I have is from her.
She probably just wanted to get rid of you, Dan.
She's got to try harder because it's not happening.
Yes, that didn't happen. That's funny. That's very cute. Did you ever meet the Rebbe?
I did actually. I met the Rebbe a few times, and I got dollars as kids from the Rebbe, which I'm very happy to see that I have these and the memories that I have. I was very young when I have it, but I do have some vague recollections. But I'm just so happy that I had that experience.
Yeah. So the Rebbe would have sessions where he would meet people. He would meet and I guess hundreds of people at one time. They would come and he would lay and bless them. Is that correct?
So thousands of people on Sundays who would go and they would pass by of all different cultures, of all different faiths. And one of the things that I love was Mayor David Dinkins. He was the mayor of New York City at the time.
Yep.
And he came by during the Crown Heights riots. It was the riots between the African Americans and the Jamaican Americans with the people of Crown Heights, the Jewish people of Crown Heights. So Mayor Dinkins comes and he says, and so the Rebbe gives him $1, so he gives him blessings, and he said, and by the way, when the Rebbe gives dollars, it's I say you should take that dollar or another dollar, you switch it out, and you should give to charity because the Rebbe was very big on making sure that everybody gives charity. So much so that even when I do stuff at work or even on this podcast, I have my charity box wherever I go, and I'm constantly giving charity because we have to learn to be givers and take care of each other, and that's one of the things. So the Rebbe gives $1, and Mayor Dinkins said, "Yes, this is for blessings, and we have to. Both sides of this argument have to change." And the Rebbe responded, "There are no two sides. There is only one people in one city under one God." And I thought that beautiful universality message that came up that we're all one people and the one God, it was so powerful, so beautiful. I love it. So yes, the Rebbe will give out dollars, and I had the privilege on one of those Sundays to go get $1, me and with my parents and my sister.
Yeah. So you have a Reby dollar.
I do have a Rebbe dollar.
And I think my understanding is that they're worth about $10,000 now. So
They're very expensive, but it's not even the monetary value about it. It's just that you have
no,
something that
I understand, but I understand that because I tried to get a Reby dollar one time. I said, "Can I get a Reby dollar from a family?" They said, "Well, you have to pay about multiple thousands of dollars." And I said, "Well, maybe I'll just kind of fake like it's a Reby dollar, but just pull $1 out of my wallet." So you are here because this coming week we're going to be having Passover. And
Mhm.
I want to talk about Passover because this is one of the most important holidays on the Jewish calendar, obviously. And so I think that to really kind of talk about Passover is I'm not totally sure a lot of people really understand the essence of Passover and what it really means. So that's why you're here, Dan, Rabbi Dan, Dr. Rabbi Dan. And so
All right.
I
Yeah.
think that we have to back up a little bit and talk initially about the person Joseph. So maybe we'll start there. Can you kind of fill us in about who Joseph was?
Joseph was a beloved son of his father Jacob, and he was 17 years old. Brothers became jealous of him, argued with him, and he was sold as a slave to Egypt. In Egypt, he was made to be a servant in an aristocrat's house, Potiphar, and while he was there in the house, he was successful in everything he did. One of the reasons was, it says, because he was constantly having God's name on his tongue. And just like right before we started this podcast, we said a prayer. He also did that, and he was very successful many times over. But his master's wife started to take a liking to his, and he said it was beautiful and all that. And every day he would try to seduce him. I know left and right. He did not fall for that. And in fact, I got to one point where she almost forced him and he ran away. Well, she got very angry and she said, if you do, I'm going to have you get into big trouble if you leave me. And he left. So she went and told her husband, who's an aristocrat, that he actually tried to seduce me. And he was placed into jail. And as he was placed into jail for many years, he was again successful in jail, which was a phenomenal lesson. It says the only place in the whole Bible that it says the person was an ish matzliach, a successful man, was Joseph when he was in jail. And
Wow.
just to show you that some people can be free even when they're in jail, and other people, even when they're free, they're actually in a self-imposed jail. And it's up to you how you view life and how you do it. And he went, and even in jail, he was successful, and he started to interpret dreams for people. The butler and the baker. When the butler and the baker had a dream, he interpreted correctly. They got freed. One of them got hung. But the butler went back to Pharaoh, and he was serving Pharaoh again. And Pharaoh started having dreams. He had some dreams about some cows and some wheat, and nobody could interpret it. Everybody goes, nobody can interpret it. So the butler remembered, hey, there was Joseph in jail. And while he was in jail, he interpreted my dream. Maybe Pharaoh, he could interpret your dream. So they call Joseph. Joseph comes up and they says that I heard you can interpret dreams. Says, listen, I can't do anything by myself. If God puts it in my head, I'll tell you what it is. No problem. Again, he was really humble like that. So he interpreted correctly, and he gave advice on what to do. And because of that, Egypt prospered and became very successful. And Joseph called his family. He said, let's make peace with the brothers. The brothers came to make peace with the father. And they all came from Israel. They came to Egypt. And they lived
Dan,
in Egypt.
can I interject one thing? So I
Yeah,
think the dream he interpreted for Pharaoh was that there were going to be 7 fat years and then 7 lean years, and so
correct.
that was when he was actually made to be overseer of this of the harvest and what have you, and that was his real breakout success. Correct?
Exactly. He says, because uh, if you think about it, though, Bob, there were 7 fat cows and there were seven skinny cows. Why is it so hard to figure out that fat cows represent years of plenty, and 7 skinny cows represent years of famine? Why didn't any of the other interpreters think of that? And the answer is they did. Actually, some of them did mention that. But there was one aspect that Pharaoh couldn't understand. There's one aspect was that at one point the 7 fat cows were staying on the horizon in his dream, and when the 7 skinny cows are there at the same time, and they were there at the same time, and then the 7 skinny cows ate the fat cows. So the Pharaoh and nobody could explain why were the fat cows and the skinny cows there at the same time.
Yeah.
So Joseph interpreted correctly, and Joseph said the reason is because is during the skinny years, you have to start, sorry, during the fat years, you have to start preparing for the skinny years as well, which means when you're doing well in life, don't think of it like that. Plan away and save, put stuff in the thing for the times when the famine comes, so that way you will. And that's why Joseph was successful in that, because he was able to interpret why they had to both exist at the same time in the dream. And Pharaoh loved that.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So so he and then now so how did that was Joseph.
So that was
Did
Joseph.
how did all his Hebrew brothers make it down to Egypt?
So then his brothers went and they wanted to, there was a famine, and during the famine years, there's 2 years, the second year of famine, there was famine everywhere, not just Egypt, all around. And the only place that had food though was in Egypt, thanks to Joseph, because he had in these stores in the bank account. So everybody that came had to come, and when I wanted food, had to come to Egypt. So Jacob sent his sons. They came to Egypt, and when they came to Egypt, when they came, one of the things that they did was also wanted to find Joseph again. They always felt bad about what they did. And they came to find that they couldn't find him, because they were like looking, do you know any slave named Joseph? Do you know any slave? Nobody knew a slave named Joseph. And because he was no longer a slave. So they were looking and trying to find what's going on. And anyway, they were just going and buying food. But Joseph also always wanted to know, was waiting for his brothers to come, because he knew if the whole world is coming to Egypt, his brothers are probably going to come. And he wanted to get the ledger from the customs agents and says, I want to know who's coming every single day. Well, one day he's looking through the ledgers of the custom agent and he says, hey, this Reuben, son of Jacob, has just come. Shimon, Levi, and they're all son of Jacob, they're all coming. He's like, oh, these are my brothers. He collects them all, and he tests them at first to see have they really done teshuvah, repented for what they've done, for the wrong they've done. And they go and they pass the test, and he says, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? And they're shocked. Wow. How a 17-year-old boy in a land by himself didn't get swallowed by the culture, but maintained his identity and accepted who he was, where they were very impressed by that. And they go and they send off wagons to bring his father and the rest of the family. Jacob comes and everybody moves in to Egypt, and they move to a certain city of Goshen where they stay. for until a time of what happens until a few generations. A few generations happen, and it says a new Pharaoh came. So the Pharaoh that loved Joseph came, and the new Pharaoh didn't know of Joseph.
That's right.
So
That's right. They
question:
had they like, who's Joseph? We don't know.
Who's
Like, yeah,
hey,
he's
who's Joseph?
yeah.
I have a question for you. If a new president comes, they don't know of like the previous presidents. If a new Joseph, so the commentaries say Rashi says it could have been a new Pharaoh came, or it actually was the same Pharaoh, but he decided to forget about how this Jewish boy had helped him and all that, about the Jewish influence. And he decided to make new decrees on the Jewish nation and make it a little bit harder for them to live. And he put into the slavery started, and it was a slavery of 210 years. And they were there, and it was really hard. Nobody could. It says not one person ever was able to flee from Egypt. It was so highly guarded, and so the Jews were slaves there for 210 years, and they thought they were going to be slaves there forever. There was no
Forever.
signs of anything that was going to change. And then comes one person, Moses. And Moses was a boy who grew up. He was actually a Jewish boy that was given away up for adoption in the Nile River. And he was picked up by Pharaoh's daughter, Vatia. She picked him up and raised him in the castle of Pharaoh. And because of one reason or another, Moses, when he got bigger, he ran away. And he ran away, and he ran with Midian. And while he was there, he was a shepherd. He was taking care of some lambs and sheep, and he sees a burning bush. Okay, and he sees a bush, and the bush is on fire, but the leaves aren't burning, the wood's not burning, but it's on fire. And he gets there, and God says, you're standing on holy ground. Take off your shoes." And I was like, "Who is this?" And he says, I am the God, Lord your God. It's time to free the Jewish people." And he hears this, and God tells him what to do, what signs to give the Jews, and Moses goes back to Egypt. And before I continue, I have to tell you a famous joke. The joke goes like this. Now, in the present day, President Bush is going for a jog, and lo and behold, oh, I can't believe it. Who does he see? He sees Moses. So he goes up, "Moses, Moses." And Moses just puts his head down and looks the other way and starts walking like, "Moses, Moses." No, he's not telling me. He sends a secret server. "Go get him, bring him to me." Secret server says, "Excuse me, are you Moses?" He says, "Yes, I am." He says, "Why are you avoiding me?" So Moses says, "The last time I spoke to a bush, I ended up wandering the desert for 40 years." So this is a President Bush. We're talking right now a burning bush.
A burning bush.
Uh,
That's
yeah,
good.
yeah.
I like that.
So he goes to the people, and he says, "I am here to free you." Now the people were like, says, "Okay, listen, we don't need any fake promises, and you're about this is improving that. Just let us work. Let us do our thing." No one says, no one's freeing us. This is who we are. This is where we are. I'm telling you, I'm going to free you guys. It's not happening. He goes to Pharaoh. Pharaoh says, what are you doing? You're just making everybody lazy, and he makes the slavery even harder. And even Moses doesn't understand, why is this happening? Because guys, why is this happening? You're making it harder. Because don't worry, I'm going to show Egypt my signs. So then God brings down one plague after another plague after another, brings down 10 plagues. And with these 10 plagues, the world realizes the power of God, and realize both Jews and the Egyptians, non-Jewish nations, realize the power of God. And with that, Pharaoh says, "Listen, leave." And the Jews, they run out, they leave. They don't have. They're in such a rush. They don't have time for cooking. They're cooking their bread. The bread doesn't have time to rise. It's flat bread they have to take with them, matzah, and they have to go, and then they have to leave. They get to an ocean, but now Egypt gets cold feet. They come after them, Pharaoh and the army, but the Jews are stuck between an ocean and Pharaoh. They don't know what to do, so they just said, "Listen, God told us we gotta go to Mount Sinai, get the Torah. we're just gonna go. So there was a person, Nadab and Avihu, jumps in and just goes in, and with that, the water is split. They cross now, and they get to Mount Sinai, and we're getting the Torah. And as we went to Mount Sinai, that's where we received the Torah. And not just the Torah, we also received the 7 law and universal laws. The 7 laws, they call them 7 laws of Noah, the Noahites, where God says these laws apply to everybody of all faiths, of all backgrounds. These laws include, number one, make sure there's a court system in place, so when people fight, they don't have to use guns and gang warfare. Number two, no animal cruelty. Number three, don't curse God. Make sure you respect authority. Number four, make sure you don't worship idols. And the idols of nowadays are money, number of likes that you have on Instagram or anything like that. Number five, don't steal. And it's not about not getting caught. It's just, even if you don't get caught, you don't steal. 6 is no immoral relations. And 7, no killing. We don't kill. It's important to have that. These 7 laws of Noah are very important. And one of the laws, by the way, like a sub part of it includes a law of charity again for the whole world. Everybody has to care about one another. So instead of being self-centered, you should become other-centered. That's the whole purpose of life.
So
And
let me interject. So we're talking about the Noahide laws, which are 7, and then you also obviously have the 10 Commandments, where the big 10, which includes things like honoring your father and your mother, and also honoring the Sabbath day and keeping it holy. I want to back up for a second, because one of the plagues of Egypt, of course, are many. The frogs and the boils and the hail, but the last one, Dan, which I think you skipped over a little bit, and we're talking about Passover, was the Passover, the idea that the angel of death. And I want to, because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about the Passover. And so I want to mention this, and I want your take on this, because and many of those people listening know that the Passover happened, it resulted in the death of the firstborn, not only of the Egyptian people, but also of the animals, right? It was a cataclysmic moment, but the Hebrews were spared. And tell us a little bit about this whole concept of the idea of the Passover and the blood on the lintels and that whole thing, because this is very important.
Absolutely. So God warns Pharaoh that he's going to go and kill the firstborns. And he tells the Jews, I'm going to send an angel. And this angel is an angel of destruction that doesn't necessarily know difference. When his job is to destroy. So for you Jews to be safe, you're going to take the blood of a lamb. Now you have to understand, the lamb was their god. They worshiped it. The Jews had to take a lamb, put it hold it with a leash next to their bed for 4 days. And the Egyptians are like, what are you doing with our God? Said, well, our God told us that we're going to actually chop your God's head off, and we're going to take the blood, and we need it. And they're like, what? What do you think you slaves are going to do? It's never going to happen. And we're going to, whatever you do to that lamb, we're going to do to you, in a trash talking. And the Jews then went and they listened to God. They took the lamb, they sacrificed it, they put the blood on the doorpost, and any post that had the blood on it, the angel of death that came over would pass over the houses that had that, and will go to the houses of the Egyptians that had, and the Egyptian houses, they were the ones that had a lot of suffering of the firstborn. There was one firstborn Egyptian that did not die. Do you know who that was?
Do not know. Who was it?
Pharaoh himself. Pharaoh himself was the firstborn, and God did not. That was the only one that did not die, and because he had to see the miracles and what was going on. So, when that happened, God went and he chose his people by passing over their houses, and he only hit the Egyptians with that last final plague. And when that happened, and Pharaoh saw his own firstborn pass away, that's when he came running and he says, you guys can go now, be free, just leave us alone.
So I think that the last one exhausted them. They had been having all these different plagues, which were devastating to the land and to the people. And I think that when he saw that, he saw the power of God manifold and manifest in a big way. And I think that was it. Okay, listen, the crazy thing is, and I always find this interesting in the story of the Passover and the freedom of, flight of the Hebrew people, was that Pharaoh changed his mind. It's like, come
Mhm.
on, man, you are like, you're looking for trouble. And so he sent the army after them. And I was like, this is like a guy who doesn't seem to learn very well. What do you think about that?
Sometimes when you become you accustomed to doing the wrong thing, you become addicted to it, and your addictions overpower you, and you just do the wrong thing over and over and over, make wrong decisions over and over again until you break that cycle. And I think that's one of another lessons. I mean, I have certain lessons that we're going to talk about lessons, again, universal life lessons from the story of Passover, because Torah is a derivation of the word Torah. Torah is Torah. Torah means a lesson. Torah is not a history book about just what happened. It's actually a lesson that every story in the Torah and every law of the Torah is applicable to our day in and day out life. So one of the lessons that we can learn is that how much God wants to connect with us and your connection with the divine. He wants us to realize that anytime you're facing your own Pharaoh, which is your own faults, your own little dark secrets that you have to deal with, remember you're not alone. God is with you. God is with you wherever you go. And God was with Moses, and God was with people, the slaves. And you might be the underdog, and the whole world is against you, and nothing looks right, and you look hopeless. God is with you, and He's with you, and you're facing that. You're never alone. And I think that that's one of the things that we can teach our children nowadays, what we're talking about, is that they should know a mindfulness that I always say that you're never alone. And one of the things that the Reby was very big on was, for example, having a moment of silence in all schools before school start. Doesn't have to be any religious school and even public school. A moment of silence where a child can think of something that their parents have taught them. So everything is just familiar about that. But they should realize that there's an eye that sees and an ear that hears. It's not about not getting caught and beating the cop. It's realize just doing the right thing just because. That's a very important thing. That just because that's what God said you have to do. And that's one of the big lessons of Passover is that connection. Another big lesson for Passover is about personal responsibility. There was the Hushantine Rebbe. It was another type of Rebbe from another city. And there was a reporter that heard about this Hushantine Rebbe, and he's asked somebody, who is this Hushantine Rebbe? He says, well, oh, he's a wonder rabbi, a Wunder rabbi, a Wunder. That's how you say it I believe it's in German. A Wunder Rebbe. He says, a Wunder Rebbe. What? I have to go and interview him. And this happened about 100 years ago. He says, he goes in and he says, I hear you're a Wunder Rebbe, a Wonder Rabbi. What is a Wonder Rabbi? So the Sante Rebbe says, there are different levels of rabbis. There's a rabbi of a small neighborhood. There's a rabbi of a city. There's a rabbi of a country. And then you have what's called a wonder rabbi. He's a rabbi who's a master of himself. Learning to go and master yourself is a wondrous thing. It's the hardest thing. Everyone wants to go change the world. The way you change the world is by you change yourself. And a person might say, I can't change. I've been doing this so long. I've messed up so many times. This is who I am. My parents were like this. My genetics even say I'm predisposed to this and all that. I can't change. Another lesson is Passover teaches you have the freedom to change. You are never a slave to your previous self. You have a freedom to change. Don't become complacent. And one of the things
Very,
that was
very
very
good.
important,
Very, very good lesson, by the way, Dan. That's excellent.
you like, no,
Yes.
there's another lesson that the Baal Shem Tov, maybe you heard about him in Israel. Baal Shem Tov was
Sure.
also a very famous rabbi. And he said coming out of Egypt was actually not a one-step sort of thing. It even says it says, here are your coming out of Egypt in plural. And then we go to, it lists out 42 different spots, which are all coming out of Egypt. So he says, why does it say there are 42 exoduses happening. 42 exoduses from Egypt? No, the first time you come out of Egypt is you're out. What do you mean 42 exoduses? It says every person has 42 steps and stages in their lives, chapters in their own personal biography that they have to go through. And any time they go out from who they are, they get to the next higher level, that's one Egypt. But now this new level, they're used to it. They got to come out of this habit and go up. You have to free yourself from complacency of being the same. Don't be afraid to change. You've changed. Okay, good. You got to this level. Now this is your new Egypt. Next level. Okay, now you're at this level. Now you're here. Now this is your new Egypt. Get out of this one
Right.
and keep
Right.
climbing. Keep climbing. You keep going until
Well,
you
it
know,
is very interesting that immediately after they finally got across the Red Sea, and they were at Sinai, that they were then relegated to being 40 years in the desert. And one thought, in the Christian world is that it took them about 40 years to purge themselves. It was actually a new generation of the slavery that had become inculcated almost in their DNA. And it took a while to really kind of get to break the slavery cycle because they wanted to go back. As you remember, they complained to Moses when they made it across. They said, "We want the leeks. We want the food we had back in Egypt. It was a lot better than what you're providing here," which was not much, other than the manna and the pigeons, I guess. But anyway, so it took a while to get slavery purged out of the former slave. So it isn't like you just suddenly get your freedom and all of a sudden you're a free person. You have to the Shem Tov, the 42 steps, that makes perfect sense to me because it takes a while to purge that out of your body, out of your
they,
brain.
they, they asked the question, why did it take two people to lead the Jews out? It was Moses and Aaron, his brother. Why
That's
two
right.
people? Why couldn't one person? It says one person was to take the people, the Jews, out of Egypt. The other one was to take the Egypt out of the Jews. It's just
That's,
changing that mindset.
that's
And and it was in that for those 40 years, they were getting everything. They were surrounded by clouds of glory, which was air conditioned, pretty much. It was clouds of glory on all sides. They were given food, manna, that just tastes like anything you want. They had they had all the food taken care of. They didn't have to work. They had water with them. It was called the Well of Miriam with them. So they had everything taken care of with them. Their clothes would grow with them. It was a generation of miracles. But if people are like, we love this. We want to stay in the desert. We want to do it. God says, no, I want you to go in the world. I want you to go in the world and affect the world and change it. Be a member, not just to stay secluded. Again, let's go in the world and improve the world and make a better place. Go into Israel. That's what I really want you to do. Even though you get everything provided for, and it's a much nicer thing, and you have all this free time to learn that, I want you to get in the world, work and change this world. This world that I give you is this world of Israel, the whole world that I had, planet Earth, is a garden. It's a garden. Take care of it and make it blossom.
So that, I mean, you're talking about going into the promised land. Well, that was where they were called to go. So if they would have stayed in the desert, they would have never made the promised land. And so that
Exactly.
that is a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. So Dan, I'm watching our time. We're finishing up here. I want you to, okay, this my subtitle of this podcast is Where Kids and Culture Collide. Why is it important to teach your kids these lessons?
Oh, super important. Okay. So I think a few more lessons besides the ones we spoke about connecting with divine, which is mindfulness nowadays, and everyone's talking about that, personal responsibilities, is that these lessons are very important. I think one of the things that people are asking is how come this generation, people are not as resilient? We're seeing such high rates of mental health problems. Where does the resilience come from? These lessons of Passover, the story, will teach you to be more resilient. Another, for example, lesson is ability of hope and redemption is that you could be stuck in an eye, but your redemption can come in like a blink of an eye. Just like it can be blink of an eye. Change does happen. Never think that you're always going to be in darkness. Remember the hope. Number two, it teaches kids to have gratitude and appreciation of what they have. You have freedom. You're not a slave. You can do stuff. So use that freedom. Use your abilities. You could do that. It teaches that to them. It's a great thing. And I think one of the other things that is great is number three is the tradition that the elders have to teach the youth. You have to learn from the previous generation. Nowadays, I think there's a bit of a disconnect with the younger and the older generations. The younger people think they know more, they have better hands-on technology. The older people, they don't know what social media is, Instagram is. Definitely the grandparents don't know as much as they do, or much more savvy. So there's sometimes a disconnect. But this story of Passover, it teaches you, there's so much you can learn from your elders. There's so much. And one of the commandments of the night of Passover is that you have to go and give the story over to somebody who knows less than you or who's younger than you. You have to. It has to be in that form. That's a beautiful lesson to teach. And I think the last final lesson, I mean, there's so many, but
By the way, by the way, Dan, you're doing that today. I want you to know you're doing that today. So you're fulfilling that command.
I'm teaching the younger generation. Thank you.
Oh, you're teaching just everybody listening. You're teaching them too.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I want to teach about also the matzah. It's flatbread.
Yep.
And there's a lesson for that as well. Is that difference between matzah, flatbread, and regular bread is that matzah is flat; it doesn't rise. Rising, being full of air, is ego. Sometimes whenever you think you're the best, or you are number one, or I want to be the best like that, that's when ego comes into play, and that's no longer kosher, especially on Passover. Bread is no fun. You have to learn to be flat. And in life, it's good to be flat. Be humble. Realize if you have any traits or talents, that's good. You do have them. Don't say, I don't have any traits. No, you do have it. But remember where they come from. They come from the Creator. He gave you those talents. And if you would have given those talents to anybody else, they would do a better job than even you would do. So you should stay humble. So even though you do have talents, and you should be aware of your talents, remember to stay humble.
It's very good. Well, you're a humble guy, Dan, and I so appreciate you. So, friends, this is you're now you know a little bit more about Passover, everyone. I think this has been a great conversation. Dan, thank you for taking the time to be on the Hamilton Review. You're a tremendous guest. So I'm happy Passover, which is coming up, I think, this coming weekend. So, and to all of you listening, happy Passover. I hope you guys listened and heard some things that were very valuable. So, friends, and so Dan, Rabbi, Dr. Daniel Ganjian, thanks for being on the Hamilton Review.
My pleasure, Bob. It's always a pleasure to talk with you and connect with you.
And friends, thank you for tuning in today. It's been a pleasure having you. Until next time, be well. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Hamilton Review, where kids and culture collide. Thank you for allowing us to be a part of your day. Tune in again next week on Apple Podcast. Rate and comment and tell a friend.